The CBC is doing the opposite of what most media outlets are doing right now. It has unveiled plans this morning to hire more local journalists right across Canada. That's part of a plan to better serve underserved communities. Now, the expansion focuses on Western Canada. It includes 6 new or expanded roles here in BC, and that includes a new position to expand in our Nanaimo Bureau. Yes, Nanaimo, you are within our listening area, which is currently served by video journalist Claire Palmer. And joining us for more details is Alison Broddle, CBC's Managing Director for British Columbia, also my boss. Hi, Alison.
Hi, Stephen. Good morning.
Good morning to you. I gave some broad strokes there, but just tell us about this expansion, what it actually means for BC, because it is, as I said, the opposite of what most local news outlets are doing.
Yeah, and that's actually part of what's motivating it, is that there are communities that have, unfortunately, lost their local paper, lost their local radio station, and we are in a position to be able to hire some more journalists and get them on the ground, get them in communities where they can check in with people, where they can cover city council, where they can meet people in the coffee shops and tell the stories that are important to those communities. So let me just step back a minute. So we are actually announcing 30 new positions across the country. Most of those, as you said, in Western Canada, and 8 of those right here in BC. And I'll just really quickly run through them because I think they may be of interest to our listeners. We're looking at 2 positions in the Fraser Valley. So looking at better covering Chilliwack, Abbotsford, and Mission. When we looked at the numbers and looked at the fact that there are 300,000 people in those 3 communities alone, it made sense to us that we need folks right there on the streets, on the ground. You mentioned Nanaimo. We're adding another person to that Nanaimo Bureau to cover the North Island. There's 150,000 people in those North Island communities. We're expanding in the interior, so Salmon Arm and the region around it, Penticton and the region around Penticton. Where we haven't been is Fort St. John, so that whole Peace region, looking at opening a bureau there. And then one more closer to home here is what we're calling a Sea to Sky / Sunshine Coast Bureau, likely based in Squamish, but covering that whole region. So again, getting stories out of all of those communities up and down the Sea to Sky corridor.
All right. And so the communities, as you just mentioned, they're underserved communities, but you also looked at where, the population is obviously.
Yeah, and where the population growth is happening and projected to continue growing. So definitely the Fraser Valley, definitely the interior and the North Island. And I just want to be clear because you did ask sort of why now when everybody else is pulling back. And listen, we're under budget constraints, as you well know, and we're looking at being very careful about how we spend our money. But we're really fortunate at this moment in time to have a bit of extra money coming to us. And this comes from something called the Online News Act, which is basically forcing Google to put a chunk of money in a fund for Canadian news organizations. So Google and other companies access our content, and the government has said, you need to pay for this, Google. So Google has set up a fund. It's $100 million a year for 5 years. We're not getting all of that. CBC is getting 7% of that. Yeah. But that's why we're able to make a really conscious, deliberate decision to say we're going to put that money into local reporting.
Right.
And I know you, Stephen, as a former city council reporter, you know how important it is to be there and hold those guys to account and make sure that we know what's going on as it's happening and not hearing about it later on or after the fact. And so I'm looking forward to the stories that are going to come out of these bureaus.
And there are also, there's big loss of trust in media, as we know, and we also happen to know there's been study after study to show that, people trust their local news sources more than they would trust, big national news sources or a big network in the United States because, they know who the people are. They see them on the street. They live in their communities. I think people think there's an extra layer of accountability there. Here's a question for you, because I'm not going to suspend my critical thinking just because you're my boss. What about doing this at a time when you have a conservative leader who is threatening to shut down the CBC? You're going to, go out and hire for however many, you said 80 new positions?
30.
30 new positions.
Yes.
You're going to go hire for 30 new positions. A year from now, Pierre Poilievre might be the Prime Minister of Canada and might be talking about shutting down the CBC.
So listen, we're not ignoring the political reality. We're paying attention to it. But I think Canadians expect us to do our jobs and not just curl up in the fetal position and, wait and see what happens. So I think we have a responsibility. We have a mandate to continue covering the news and to do it the best way we know how. Mm-hmm. And this is the best way we know how. You're right about the local, trusted journalism coming from on the ground and in the communities. And I will say on the flip side of that, I am very encouraged to see things like the McGill University survey that came out last fall that said, despite all the political rhetoric, nearly 80% of people surveyed said that the CBC was as important or more important than ever, and that they want the CBC to continue. Yeah. Now, maybe not exactly as is. There's, we're open to criticism. There's things that could be better. Yep. But I take heart from that when I look at that sort of broad survey of Canadians and how important CBC is, and CBC Radio in particular, in small communities as that lifeline.
And I think it's pretty clear the way we are trying to reach more and more people all the time, as I, broadcast on video and online and on CBC Gem and on radio and on smart speakers and everything else. So, a million ways to get to us. Alison, thank you so much. We're going to have to wrap it up there, but you understand that. Alison Broddle, Senior Managing Director.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Appreciate it.